June 12, 1944, just outside Saint-Lay, Normandy. The rain hadn't started yet, but the smell of wet soil already lingered in the air. The hedgerows stretched like green walls through the fields, hiding danger in every direction. Smoke still curled from the distant wrecks of yesterday's skirmish. Sergeant Robert Hayes sat inside his M4 Sherman. Daisy May, fingers tapping the metal of the periscope, eyes fixed on the horizon. His crew had been fighting for nearly a week since landing on Omaha Beach. They'd seen the enemy's beasts up close, the German Panthers, and the memory of one encounter still made his stomach twist. "They call us the Ronsons," joked Corporal Miller, the gunner, lighting a cigarette. "Lights up easy." Private Jenkins, their loader, smirked nervously. "Yeah, because of this tin can armor." Even inside the tank they could still hear it, the echo of German radio chatter, the enemy mocking them. Sherman? Papierpanzer, paper tank, a joke, a moving coffin. And truth be told, they weren't wrong, at least, not yet. The Panthers were monsters. Long-barreled 75mm guns, heavy sloped armor, the kind of precision German engineering that could punch through a Sherman from half a mile away. Every Allied tanker knew it. Every Sherman crew that faced one head-on paid the price. But the Americans had numbers and speed. And Hayes had something else, belief. Belief that somehow, if they kept pushing, something would break, and it wouldn't be them. By noon, the rain began to fall. Slowly at first, like whispers on the hull. Then harder, pounding, until it drowned out the rumble of their engines. The open fields turned slick, the mud swallowing the ground under their tracks. The radio crackled, Captain Dawson's voice cutting through the static. "Hayes, move your unit to the eastern ridge. Panther positions confirmed ahead. We need eyes on that pass." Hayes swallowed hard. "Copy that, sir." As the Shermans rolled forward, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The smell of wet oil and gunpowder filled the cabin. Jenkins swore under his breath every few seconds, wiping mud from his faceplate. Miller leaned closer to the sight, scanning. Then the thunder of a German gun tore through the storm. The shell screamed past, hitting the ground beside them. Mud exploded upward, clattering against Daisy May's armor. Hayes shouted, "Back!" "Reverse, reverse." But the tank slipped, tracks spinning uselessly. Through the periscope, he caught sight of the Panther black hulking, almost regal, its cannons swiveling toward them. For a moment, it looked invincible. And then, something unexpected happened. The Panther's engine roared, then sputtered. Its treads churned, sinking deeper into the mud. The great machine, king of the battlefield, was caught trapped by its own weight. Hayes didn't hesitate. "Forward, all power." Daisy May lunged ahead, spraying mud. Miller's voice cut through the storm. "Target locked." The gun roared. A 75mm shell slammed into the Panther's side. Sparks and smoke burst from its flank. "Again," Hayes yelled. Another shot. This time the shell pierced clean through the hull. The German tank shuddered, then went still. Inside Daisy May, no one spoke for a moment. The rain hammered the roof. Then Jenkins whispered, almost laughing, that thing just sank." Hayes nodded slowly. "Yeah, and we're still standing." Outside, the battlefield was changing. What had once been a playground for German armor was becoming a swamp. The light American tanks, mocked for their size, were now gliding where the Panthers drowned. In that rain-soaked chaos, laughter shifted sides. By morning, the world had turned to sludge. Normandy wasn't just wet, it was drowning. Fields once hard enough to race across were now pits of brown, sucking filth. The air was thick with the stench of fuel, mud, and death. Sergeant Hayes stood outside his Sherman, boots sinking several inches deep every time he moved. He looked around. The landscape was unrecognizable. Tanks half buried, dead trees bent under rain, and the distant echo of artillery like thunder rolling across a dying sky. But there was one sound missing, the usual roar of German Panthers. Private Jenkins climbed out of the tank, wiping rain from his face. "Where the hell are they?" "Thought they'd be waiting for us." Hayes squinted toward the far hedgerows. "Oh, they're out there," he muttered. "They just can't move." He was right. Several miles ahead, beyond a ridge of shattered barns, German armor sat like stranded beasts. The Panthers were powerful, too powerful. Their 45-ton weight had turned into a curse. Their wide treads churned uselessly in the swampy ground, engines overheating as drivers tried desperately to free themselves. Inside one of those tanks, Oberleutnant Franz Weber slammed his fist against the controls. "Verdammt! Keep it moving!" he barked, but the Panther didn't obey. Mud sucked harder like quicksand. His radio crackled with static and panicked German voices. Unit 3 immobilized. Unit 5 stuck near the river. Weber cursed under his breath. "We built lions," he growled. "But the Americans brought foxes." Meanwhile, Hayes and his crew were on the move. The Shermans, lighter by nearly 10 tons, danced across the muddy plains with relative ease. Every churn of their tracks splattered mud but found traction. Captain Dawson's voice returned over the radio. "Charlie Unit, flank south. Panthers are bogged down. Take them out before they dig free." Hayes answered immediately. "Copy that. Moving now." They pushed forward, one tank after another, forming a line. Rain beaded on the armor, sliding down like sweat on steel. The sky above was a dull gray curtain, no sun, no shadows, only motion and noise. When the Shermans crested the ridge, the battlefield below looked surreal, half war, half graveyard. Black plumes of smoke rose from disabled German tanks. Some crews had abandoned them, sinking waist deep as they tried to flee. "Targets everywhere," Miller said, pressing his eye to the gun sight. "They're not even moving." "Don't waste it," Hayes replied. "Make every shot count." The cannon roared. One Panther erupted in fire. Another tried to pivot its turret, but the mud held it fast. A second blast followed. Flames spread, orange reflections flickering across the rain-slicked helmets of advancing U.S. infantry. Through the storm, Hayes could hear someone shouting a German commander's voice, muffled but frantic. The enemy was realizing that their invincible armor meant nothing here. For months, the Americans had suffered under the myth of the Panther, its deadly gun, its invulnerability. But now, in this sea of mud, the myth was drowning. Jenkins laughed as he reloaded. "Guess they're not laughing now." Hayes didn't answer. He was staring at something beyond the burning wrecks, a narrow pass leading toward the forest. Smoke drifted low, and in it, he saw shapes moving, not tanksmen. German infantry retreating, struggling to drag supplies through the muck. He grabbed the radio. "Command, this is Hayes. We've broken their line. Repeat, Panthers are down. The ground belongs to us now." The reply came almost instantly. "Copy that, Daisy May. Push forward. Secure the ridge. Let's finish this." The Shermans advanced again, engines growling low. The mud clung to their sides like scars, but still they moved. Through the periscope, Hayes caught sight of another Panther, this one half submerged, its turret just visible above the muck. It fired once. The shell hissed through the rain, missing wide. Hayes didn't hesitate. "Fire!" Miller's shot struck home, and the Panther's turret erupted in smoke and sparks. The crew inside never had a chance. As the black column rose into the air, Hayes exhaled, part relief, part disbelief. This wasn't just another skirmish. This was a turning point. The laughter that once echoed from German radios was gone. Now only silence and rain filled the air. By midday, the rain turned heavier sheets of water, falling so thick they blurred the horizon. The battle for Normandy had become a battle against nature itself. Captain Dawson's column of Shermans carved a muddy path through what used to be farmland. Smoke rose from distant wrecks, black pillars twisting upward like ghosts. The ground trembled with every tank tread, but it wasn't fear that haunted the Germans now, it was realization. Sergeant Hayes could hear their desperation over the radio intercepts. Static, shouts in broken German. Orders to retreat, commands to burn documents, pleas for tow cables that would never arrive. The mighty 45-ton Panthers had turned into monuments, buried by their own pride in the rain. Inside one immobilized tank, Oberleutnant Weber pressed his helmeted head against the cold steel. Outside, mud crawled up the hull like a living thing. "Scheiße, we can't move," muttered his driver. Engines flooded. Weber clenched his jaw. "Then we fight here," he said quietly, "and die standing." He climbed out, pistol in hand, staring into the gray mist where the Shermans were advancing. He could barely make out their silhouettes, squat, dirty, and relentless. "So these are the toys we mocked," he said bitterly. At that same moment, Hayes' Sherman crested a low hill. Through the periscope, he spotted Weber's Panther dead in the mud, its crew scattered like ants. "There," Hayes said. "That's command. Take the shot," the gun thundered. A second later, the Panther's turret blew apart in a flash that lit the rain like lightning. The explosion echoed across the valley. Even through the storm, it sounded final, the sound of arrogance collapsing. Private Jenkins looked out at the wrecks. They really thought they'd roll right over us. Hayes nodded slowly. Yeah, and maybe they could have, if the earth itself hadn't turned against them. By afternoon, the field was unrecognizable, a wasteland of steel and mud. Panthers lay belly down, half buried, their once feared silhouettes broken and useless. American infantry trudged past, some pointing, some laughing, all exhausted. Word spread fast through the ranks. The same tank the Germans once called a coffin on tracks had outlasted their best. Soldiers began calling it the Mud's revenge. Captain Dawson stood beside Hayes' Sherman as it idled near a smoking crater. "You know what this means, Sergeant?" he asked. Hayes smirked. "That sometimes the simplest machine wins the ugliest fight?" Dawson grinned. "No, it means the myth of the Panther just sank in French mud." He looked toward the horizon. "Tell command we're holding the ridge. And tell those boys down there," he gestured toward the infantry slogging through mud, "that the Shermans aren't laughingstocks anymore." As night fell, the rain finally began to ease. The battlefield glistened under a dark, cloud-split sky. Fires burned in the distance, flickering orange reflections in endless puddles. Hayes climbed out of his tank and sat on the turret, lighting a cigarette. The smoke curled into the damp air. Jenkins joined him. "Think they'll ever respect this old tin can?" Hayes blew out a long breath. "Respect? Maybe not. But they'll remember it." The wind carried faint echoes, German voices fading into the night. The sound of retreating boots swallowed by mud. Hayes looked out at the wrecked Panthers, their mighty frames tilted and silent. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "They built monsters that couldn't move. We built workhorses that just wouldn't stop." He tapped ash from his cigarette, watching it fall into the dirt. "In the end, that's what wins wars." Weeks later, reports from the front confirmed it. The Allies had broken through. The German counteroffensive crumbled. And though few would say it out loud, many knew the truth. The rain had been their ally, and the Sherman their unlikely hero. Years after the war, a French farmer plowing his fields near St. Lay uncovered a rusted Panther hull, still half buried in the earth. He stared at it for a long time before saying quietly, "The ground remembers." Because on those rain-soaked fields of Normandy, it wasn't just men who fought, it was the land itself. And when the mud rose, it chose the lighter tank. The one they laughed at. The one that kept moving. The Sherman.